Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and Jon Chai.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Coach Brad Wilson. Today is Tuesday, which means I'm joined by my co-host, Jon, for Tactical Tuesday. How you doing?
How's it going, Brad? Doing pretty good.
I'm doing very well. Yeah, I'm doing very... Don't bother. You can just ask a question. And
no, I didn't mean to. Tell us how you're doing.
I'm doing well. That's
Me
it. Coming off a high of going to see Cirque du Soleil last night. Always, we've talked about mental, physical, and spiritual block when we were talking about the elites, and Cirque is firmly in the spiritual space.
Which Cirque did you go to?
Curios in Atlanta. They're going to be here for the next 3 or 4 months. They build a giant tent and have like nightly performances every day for...
Do they have like a theme or like a,
Yeah, it's Cabinet of Curiosities. So circus themed, obviously, but then like, kind of the freak show type thing, which, yeah, if the listener is familiar with Cirque, you'll know that they can do some really, really wild and crazy things given especially that theme.
You think you'll go again in the next 3 or 4 months?
I already have tickets to go again. So. I don't think I'm going to go again. I know I'm going to go again.
No wonder Guy can lose 25 million online.
Yeah. Like, I mean, there's nothing like it. To me, it's the best entertainment. Like, it's just, it's food for my spirit. It's food for my soul. It's just a creative endeavor that I think is... just there's nothing like it. As people that are just at the top of their game and very niche things, but are just incredible to see.
Yeah. I love the Cirque shows too. I think there are only like a couple that I haven't seen in Vegas yet, and I've seen a bunch of them like twice. So I'm also in the Guy donation.
Oh, I'll be a Guy donator for life. Whatever I can do to support Cirque du Soleil. By the way, this podcast is not brought to you by Cirque du Soleil either. It's just a happy side effect for them.
We're trying to get in the good games.
Guy, where are you? Hit me up in my Twitter DMs. What's the theme for today's show?
3-bet pots out of position, and I have value both times. I just wasn't really sure what to do with my value.
Okay.
It's like the rare spot where that happens. Usually I have nothing, and the question is, what should I do?
Yeah, it's much harder to figure out what to do when you have something than what to do when you have nothing, right? All right, so let's dive in. First hand is you have queens in the small blind. Villain opens to $25, playing 5-10. You 3-bet to 110. Big blind folds, and the villain calls. Looks like you're starting the hand with about 150 bigs, and villain has you covered, the in position. Player, and I assume they're a reg.
Yeah. So I'm going to 3-bet here. I think we could... probably shouldn't spend too much time talking about 3-bet sizing, but I think you go bigger than usual here, given that I'm deeper with the cutoff. I guess one of the considerations is that there's still the live range in the big blind, which maybe disincentivizes me from changing my 3-bet size. Anyways, I go with the standard size, 11 big blinds, the cutoff calls.
And we go to a flop.
Jack, deuce, deuce, rainbow.
Jack, deuce, deuce, rainbow. There's 230 in the pot. You've got 140 behind. I guess we'll start here. I assume you start off with a C-bet.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of things you can do, but with your C-bet size, or maybe even... I don't know about checking, but you could do a lot of things with your C-bet size here. I start out with like a very standard, just 1/3. Get called by the cutoff, which is not surprising. I expect them to call on Jack deuce deuce with a lot of stuff. Like I don't.
most everything.
Yeah, I don't think like ace high is folding. I don't think like any two overs combos is folding. Anything with a backdoor flush draw likely not folding. Obviously, no pairs are folding to this size. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty nice. He probably never has a deuce. So um, just feeling pretty good about my hand.
Yeah, I think any two cards connected with the jack are probably not folding, like 9-10.
Yeah.
Maybe even like 10-8 suited, those hands. Maybe
Yeah.
6-7 and 7-8
Queen
may
10.
fold.
Yeah.
Queen 10 definitely not folding.
Oh.
Yeah, so getting called pretty wide here. Turn is a 7 of diamonds. You do have the queen of diamonds. Board is now jack deuce deuce 7 with the 7 deuce of diamonds. There's 379 in the pot.
So here I'm actually like the thought that's going through my head is kind of the flip side of the pocket tens discussion we've been having like on Tactical Tuesday the last couple of weeks, where like here I'm thinking like, okay, I think there are a lot of just like kind of floats that the cutoff has once I bet that small size. And I think a lot of them are going to either have like picked up real equity on this diamond or, you know, didn't pick up any equity and still feels like the need to start bluffing here if they just had like, you know, the 9-10 or 8-9. I guess those did pick up equity. But even just like 4-5 of clubs or something like that, I think would likely just start betting here. So yeah, I thought this was a spot where like it would be more reasonable to check and expect like a stab or a bluff or even just like a value own from the cutoff.
Yeah, you're going to gain a lot of information through checking here. I think that when villain checks back, they're going to have bluff catchers quite often, which gives us a pretty easy value bet on the river to execute.
Yep.
I think that like when villains polarize and go big, I think they're going to have a bunch of natural bluffs in their range. I think if they go small, then, you know, there's ways to combat that as far as like calling the turn and then, you know, maybe leading rivers or something along those lines. So like basically I think that when you check, you're going to get a lot of information out of the in position villain. The only downside to checking would be if, you know, they're not, they have a very small bluff range or very small possible bluff range. In this case, I think you're right that they do have quite a chunky stab range that has a bunch of low equity hands in it. And the downside of checking is like if they have a jack, you know, ace jack or something that, you know, you could go 3 streets and get value from. But I think that them having a lot of the just a wide air region on the turn makes it to where preference would be to check.
Yeah, that's what I go ahead and do. That's the exact logic that I had. And he checks back the turn. So we should start like thinking about what this means, right? As soon as he checks back. I think this is
Sure.
My gut feeling was that this is indicative of like some showdown bound hand. So like probably all the jack X that's not like ace jack, maybe like king jack could check back sometimes. But basically like a lot of his jack X I think is just going to check back the turn. I think a lot of hands like 10s, 8s, I don't know, a 7 that made a pair, for example, are going to check back the turn. So that's sort of the range that I'm putting him on now once he does not stab.
Yep, I'm with you. And you check back, there's a 9, which improves 8-10, and 9s, 2 full houses. The final board is jack, deuce, deuce, 7-9. No flush available. Still 379 in the pot. Villain has, John has 1330. He's the effective stack. So, yeah, given what we talked about on the turn, I think we have a couple of options on the river.
Yeah.
I think checking is probably not the ideal option.
Oh, really? I thought that was one of the... So, like, I thought that jack X portion of the range just bets the river a lot when I check.
Yeah? That's a good point. But I think, like, 10s and 8s and 6s and 5s don't bet.
Oh, for sure. Those hands do not
Maybe
bet.
even, like, a hand that floated the flop and, like, turned to 7, like some sort of 7-8 type hand.
9-10, 8-9. Oh, I guess
9,
those
10,
would
8,
bet the
9.
turn. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I think the majority of them bet the turn. But, I mean, at some frequency, they're going to check back. But
Sure.
I think majority. So, like, to me, their range would be full of bluff catchers.
Yes.
As well as some, like, you know, semi-strong value, like queen jack, king jack,
Yeah.
ace jack, possibly.
Yeah. And so like the question is, do we bet and just target like the bluff catchers with like a catch-all size,
Mm-hmm.
or do we check, let the top end value bet, check raise, and hope that like, that's higher EV than using the catch-all size?
It's kind of hard, right? Because like to play the river for 2 bets, then you need them to call
Yeah, with a jack.
with a jack,
Yeah.
and I think that's tough. I mean, maybe they might, they might, depending on their size, like whether they feel like they're inducing by like betting really small. I would be wary and most likely just go ahead and bet the river for value myself.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that was my main question here was whether to go for the check raise on the river or to just value bet myself. I agree with you. I think the standard play is just use like the 50 to 75% ish size somewhere in there and just hope to get bluff caught by every pair.
I mean, I think, you could just, you could polarize too and go like 1.5. I think that's somewhat reasonable here. Like, I think that the perception is that a lot of your overpairs are going to bet the turn. So when you go 1.5 and polarized, you put all of their pairs basically in the same bucket, where they're bluff catching against a very polar bet.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I should have. Yeah, I think if I had given the sizing more thought, I probably would have just 1.5 the river. I was mostly thinking about like trying to capture bluff catcher value and like thinking that like, oh, I'll just use like a normal size to make sure I get called by like the 10s, 8s, and like 5s or whatever. But those might, I mean, facing 1.5x, it's like they have the same decision, I think.
Yeah, I think like an interesting component of this hand is that it's very difficult for you to not have the best hand at this
Correct.
decision point.
Correct.
So like it's very difficult, which to me means like you can widen your value range some, and just like put villains, like 6s, 8s, 10s. I mean, basically like if you overbet, then ace jack is effectively the same as 5s.
Right. Yeah. And 5s is the same, like from the cutoff perspective. 5s is the same facing 75% as it is facing overbet. Like it's just like I'm repping the same range or in his mind, I'm probably repping like the same range.
Yeah.
So yeah, in game I decided to check. I think now I'll just 1.5x, just overbet the river. I tried to get a check raise and probably just check raise like based on sizing. For example, if you went like pot or like overbet or something like that, I probably would just call with queens.
Sure.
He uses this kind of catch-all size, this middle-y size. He bets 248 into 379. I feel really good about check raising versus this size. I think this is going to be. I was like really excited. I was like, wow, I don't know if 10s would like bet this big. This is probably like just a lot of Jack X that is trying to get value from 10s, 9x, 8s, whatever, like worse hands. So I rip it. Maybe too big. I don't know. I can't imagine going a different size though.
I don't think you have a different size, but maybe. I mean, maybe you can click it. I think it's a spot where I think it's a lot. It's somewhat difficult to find bluffs. I think your range probably doesn't have a ton of bluffs.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think ripping is probably just fine too. Well, yeah, that's it.
So, anyways, I picked the jam size, and the cutoff folds. But I think the hand that he folded is going to probably start a whole conversation on recalibrating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so they turned a flush draw. And
they turned a hand that I thought would like 100% stab the turn.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I think that King 10 of spades probably does stab the turn.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Sorry. Villain has King 10 of diamonds, by the way, for the list.
Yeah, they turned a flush draw and checked it back. I mean, I'm not as shocked that villain can actually turn like decent equity and choose not to bet.
Yeah.
I think, again, if they have like King 10 of spades, they probably will bet the turn. Because that hand, like, it doesn't really matter if it gets check raise because it's not like it's having a ton of equity denied facing turn check raise. But this hand, where they actually do have equity, getting check raise is kind of a disaster. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think it doesn't really change my thought on the turn. I think the biggest calibration would be that when villains actually have a flush draw, maybe they're less inclined to bet than if they don't turn a flush draw.
Does this make you want to like recalibrate your river thought process at all? Like, does this make you want to check more? Or are you just like, this is like such a small part of their range, I'm just going to still target their bluff catchers in 1.5x and like, okay, they have some check.
Yeah, like, so
big deal.
Really, if we think about it, like we have the queen of diamonds.
Yeah.
I mean, so that reduces, I guess, like queen 10 of diamonds, king queen of diamonds, ace queen of diamonds. Yeah. So they have like king 10 of diamonds, a bunch of like ace x of diamonds, ace 3, ace 4, ace 5, ace 6, ace 8, ace 9, ace 10, and then king 10 of diamonds. I don't know that they have enough diamonds to recalibrate.
But maybe it's more than diamonds, right? Maybe it's like...
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe 8, 9? Or no, not 8, 9. Maybe, something that doesn't make a pair also checks back.
It's really difficult to know.
Yeah, we would never know.
Right. It's really hard to know, but I can't imagine that, like, if you're calling the flop with king 10 of diamonds, you're calling the flop with king 10 of spades.
Yes.
So, like, the plan is to call the flop, improve to equity, or just check and not invest any money in the pot. I just can't imagine that being their strategy, right? Because it just doesn't make sense, and it's not like...
Yeah.
I expect more out of this pool, right? So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is how many combos of diamonds do they turn? What portion of their range is going to be busted diamonds on the river compared to like Jack X? I think King Jack and Ace Jack of diamonds may check back on the turn too. Those hands would also value bet the river and call a bet on the river. Yeah, so I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, so one of the things that I know about myself is that I just like regularly underestimate the frequency with which people check back draws in spots where I would expect them to stab. And so I saw this and I was just like, here I go again, just like not calibrated correctly on like how people play draws. But then I saw him show up to the river with air and bet the air on the river that he didn't stab on the turn. And I was like, maybe that just makes checking on the river maybe that just makes checking on the river slightly better if they do have like lots of air that they stab along with their presumably stronger Jack X and value and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, if they're not betting with like the hands that we mentioned before, Queen 10 of spade, or I guess Queen 10 of clubs, King 10 of spades, Ace 10 of clubs, Ace 10 of spade. Like, if they're not betting with those hands on the turn, then I think checking on the river has a lot more merit because the air region is just
bigger. Yeah,
is just way bigger on the river. So it really it boils down to like how often they're checking air on the turn.
Yeah,
and I don't think this hand really gives us that information.
Right. Because this is a somewhat natural check back.
Yep. All right.
Okay.
So
we didn't learn anything.
We learned nothing. The end of hand number 1, we learned absolutely nothing. Let's go to the break. Maybe we'll learn something with hand number 2.
The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.
Welcome back from the break. John, let's hope that the listener can learn something in this hand. I think
we'll try this then.
part of the reason why they listen to the show, I think.
All right, more 3-bet pots out of position. This time, I think it's actually the same spot. Cutoff opens. I 3-bet the small blind with ace of clubs, king of clubs, all the same sizes. He opens to 25. I 3-bet to 110. He calls. Flop is ace, king, 9 with 2 diamonds. Really good flop. We flop top 2. Again, think you could do a lot of different things on this flop. I go ahead, do the same thing as last time. Start out with the third. Oh, no.
Nope.
Whoops.
Start out with a half.
Okay. Because I have a better hand, right? Fish scale linear Lily with the strength of their hand.
Yeah. Well done. Well done.
I think I'm just planning on going bet jam. Just looking at the sizing here.
Yeah, I mean that would make sense. I'm not sure that I love the half pot on the flop. I think the range you're targeting is too narrow on this board.
Yeah. Especially when I have an ace and a king.
Yeah. Yeah. I would start out with a third.
Yeah.
Or check. I think either.
Yeah, I think check would be.
Table.
I think check is definitely an option here.
Yeah.
Anyways, go this size. Don't think it's the end of the world. Call.
Not yet, anyway.
Ooh, do some diamonds. Probably checking range here on the turn. I don't know what you think about that. This is kind of where like I'm getting questiony or shaky.
Well, I mean, with your sizing choice on the flop, I think you probably do need to check range. I think that villain maintains most all flush draws and will mostly never raise them facing the flop half pot on ace king 9. So I just don't think that you really get to bet on the deuce of diamonds turn.
Yep.
And I think, the good news is that like for protection, they don't have a lot of offsuit combos of hands. So it's hard for them to have like pair plus flush draw.
Right. It's really hard for him, for example, to have like the naked king of diamonds in the spot because he doesn't call a 3-bet with like king queen off or king jack off or king 10 off or anything like that.
Right. So the equity that they get to realize if turn goes check check isn't like substantial.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's not really a big deal. So that all leads into like just checking on this card.
Like they might not even have like jacks with a diamond, right? Like that might just fold the flop facing half pot. So yeah, I think you're right that there's really no single diamond hands that I have to be worried about right now.
Absolutely. Correct.
So I check. He checks back. Okay, so I think this check back is like similar to. I'm interpreting the cutoff check back similarly to the cutoff check back in the hand right before this, where I think it's going to include a lot of showdown, a lot of ace X, a lot of king X. I don't know exactly what he does with gutters like jack 10 or queen jack. Again, just my inclination is that people just stab those hands on the turn, but we saw like in the last hand that I was wrong about king 10 of diamonds not stabbing the turn, so I could be wrong there, but I would just still proceed as if queen jack and jack 10 stab the flop at a decent frequency, or stab the turn at a decent frequency.
Well, I mean, queen jack, queen 10, jack 10, they have like more incentive to stab the turn on the flush completer, right?
Sure.
They have less equity, right? Like just getting check raised is not the end of the world for those hands.
And then the last thing I was going to say was that I don't think it's like out of the question that the cutoff checks back a flush.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I think they could check back. Actually, I don't know. I think it's. I mean, I guess they could and go for like 2x river jam.
Yeah.
And give us an opportunity to put money in. But yeah, so I guess what are you leaning towards on the river after turn checks through, river's a 5?
So I think their
final
range
board, by the way, is ace king 9 deuce 5, 3 diamonds.
I think their range is a lot of showdown, a lot of bluff catchers, I should say. A tiny amount of bluffs, like a tiny amount of just like air that didn't stab the turn, like the jack 10 and queen jack. Like you said, they're highly incentivized to just bet the turn because they don't care about getting check raised. And then a small amount of traps, just flushes that for some reason decided not to bet the turn. So mostly bluff catchers, and then a small region that's air and flushes.
So leads you towards betting.
Yeah, betting. And I think this is a board where those bluff catchers are very unlikely to bet the river. For example, in the last hand, like I thought the stronger jack X would definitely be tempted to bet the river because there are worse hands that I can call with. I think once I half pot the flop here, like ace, 10 suited might not bet the river.
Ace queen.
Yeah, ace queen might be like yeah, we're like I'm not sure if ace queen bets the river, which is like that's kind of exactly the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Um,
Ace 5 is the only one that got promoted.
Right.
On the river to 2 pair.
Mm-hmm.
That would obviously bet, but very small portion of the range.
So given that that's the range I'm targeting, I just ripped it here. This is like where I really, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't like the rip.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were gonna say.
I think the rip is just too much.
Just let them off the hook.
You're just applying too much pressure on their bluff catchers.
Yeah.
On a board where like it's very conceivable that you have sets and 2 pairs still in your range.
Yep.
And they also have like flushes too.
Yeah.
So like I think the disaster scenario is that you fold out bluff catchers and only get called by flushes, which
hang on to your hats.
Hang on to your hats. Okay, so you 2x river jam and villain folds. So no flush.
No
Villain
flush.
had. Let's see what villain did have. Bluff catcher. Ace 4 hearts.
That's not good.
No. I think it's somewhat expected though. Maybe not to you when you were playing this hand, but after discussing the hand and talking about it.
Yeah, after looking at this hand, I'm like, what a dumb line.
I think that like villain's range has folds. Like bluff catchers have natural folds on the river based on the sizing that they face.
Yeah.
And it's quite difficult for them to have like 2 pair.
So you'd have gone a smaller size.
I would, yeah.
And so I'm almost sure that like in game what I was thinking, I'm sure I considered the smaller size and then just thought to myself that I didn't want to make a 2-bet game on the river. And maybe this is a spot where I shouldn't be as concerned about that.
I mean, so the problem about with a 2-game thought is that if villains fold out bluff catchers to jam and call with flushes, that's a terrible situation.
Yes.
I would much rather at least bet 70, have
the
bluff catchers call.
Yeah.
And like if they jam, then we burn that bridge when we get there. I think it's very hard for them to find natural bluffs as a jam.
No, I think what you said right at the beginning was the most important thing, is that like the 2-bet game only comes into play when they call the river with their bluff catchers.
Right.
But if they don't call the river jam with the bluff catchers, then like that's not even something that should be entering my like thought process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, villain folds, and
thank God he didn't have a flush. That's all I can say. Because apparently this is just atrocious.
Well, yeah.
Hope you guys learned something from this.
I'm trying to try to spin some positive light on it, but I don't know that I can. Ace 4, like
I brought this hand to be roasted. This hand.
Yeah, Ace 4 is effectively like Ace Jack and Ace Queen and Ace 10.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Facing 2x jam, it's all the same. So, yeah, not great.
Kind of the same as like Ace 9 or Ace 5 even.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying that you have a hand that's better than 2 pair when you jam. I can't imagine them thinking you're just jamming with like Ace Queen.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, nice hand, Jonathan.
Doesn't
Maybe
feel
next
like
time.
Won the pot, but don't feel good.
Well, better to win the pot and not feel good.
Yeah,
than
that's true.
Lose the pot and feel even worse. So that'll do it for this episode of Tactical Tuesday. Thank you for listening. We will do something.
See you next week.
Peace. Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.